They laughed at her the first day she walked into the steel hangar, her boots echoing on the polished floor where the other pilots stood in clusters, half-suited and carrying helmets. The patches on their shoulders displayed names that were legends in the Air Force, aces who had flown Black Ops missions over foreign skies, veterans of wars that were never admitted on paper, men and women who carried themselves with the quiet arrogance of gods who believed the sky itself bent to their will. Among them she had been the smallest figure, her call sign stitched across her chest, Eagle 7. They whispered it with derision, some out loud, some behind tight smirks, because the number 7 was usually reserved for rookies in the training sequence, not for a seat in the command rotation. They thought she was a filler, a joke to balance out the rosters for public appearances. She ignored the mutters even when one of the senior pilots nudged another and said, Eagle 7? More like Lucky 7, and luck won't keep her alive up there. She had tightened her gloves, squared her shoulders, and met every mocking stare with eyes that had already seen the edge of fear and kept walking anyway. Her name was Commander Elara Vance, though most never bothered to use it. She was the one who'd been shuffled through programs faster than anyone had expected, the one who'd flown simulators longer than sleep, the one who, in silence, had broken records on classified trials only to see those records buried under more politically convenient reports. She had endured instructors who muttered she wasn't cut out for combat-grade decisions, endured commanders who insisted her reflexes were raw but her instincts not aligned with the right kind of aggression. She never argued because she didn't need to. She trusted the air, trusted the machine when she was strapped inside its cockpit, trusted that something in her blood made her able to read currents others never noticed. That was her weapon, her secret, and she carried it alone while the others carried their medals. But even then, no one in the hangar that morning believed she would ever be chosen. The order came during a red sky dawn when the entire base trembled with the vibration of an emergency alert. Screens lit up, klaxons roared, and the air command officers descended into the war room like shadows chasing fire. The satellite feed showed something sharp cutting through orbit. A drone, no more than that, a fleet of autonomous strike crafts, unregistered, moving faster than projected models should even allow. They were headed for population centers. They were not friendly, and they were too many for intercept squadrons to scramble in time. What the command needed wasn't an air patrol, it was a single craft, experimental, lethal, armed with systems even the other pilots had only trained on in theory. That craft was codenamed Phantom Talon, and it required a pilot who could not only fly but synchronize their own nervous system into the ship's frame. One by one, the legends of the hangar stepped forward, volunteering with fire in their voices, demanding the right to be the one who carried humanity's first counterstrike into the skies. But the neural calibration rejected them. Their pulse waves didn't align, their nervous systems fragmented when the Phantom Talon tested resonance. The machine wasn't just technology, it was alive in its own way, wired to respond to instinctive symbiosis. The veterans cursed, ripped off their helmets and slammed fists against consoles, but the data was absolute. Only one candidate remained untested. The officers hesitated because they knew what calling her name would sound like. But the system overrode hesitation. The machine had already chosen. Pilot match, Eagle 7. Clearance granted. The room went silent, so quiet the hum of fluorescent lights felt like a roar. Every gaze turned toward her, the rookie they had mocked, the woman whose call sign they'd laughed at over beers. She stepped forward, helmet under her arm, expression steady as if she had always known the day would come. Some of them sneered, muttering that it was impossible, some insisted it was a glitch, others whispered that sending her was the same as surrender. But the commanding officer's voice cut through everything. Air Command has cleared Eagle 7 for launch. And that was the end of debate. The hangar doors split open with the grinding of steel, and there she was, walking the length of the platform toward the Phantom Talon. The craft wasn't sleek like the fighters of the old wars. It was a predator forged from angles and shadows, its surface rippling with adaptive plating that made it seem half invisible even at rest. Her boots echoed on the platform as she climbed into the cockpit, sliding into the harness that would wrap her into the machine. She didn't think about the jeers that had followed her for months, didn't think about the whispers that called her nothing but a placeholder. She thought only of the way her heartbeat slowed when her palms touched the controls, the way the machine breathed with her as if it had been waiting. The canopy sealed shut, and in that instant the synchronization began. Her breath aligned with the hum of the reactor, her pulse merged with the surge of energy under the skin of the craft, and her vision expanded, bleeding beyond human scale. She could feel the drag of the atmosphere outside, taste the static of ionized air, sense the weight of the earth pulling at the wings before they even moved. And beneath all that, she felt the fleet slicing toward them from orbit, a predator pack hungry for destruction. Her lips parted as she whispered into the comms, not for anyone else, but because the words rose unbidden, Eagle 7 launching. The engines roared, fire ripped across the tarmac, and the Phantom Talon leapt forward with a violence that shook the base to its foundations. As the nose lifted and gravity broke, the mockery of months vanished into silence. They had thought she was a joke. They had thought Eagle 7 was a name that would never be remembered. But the sky did not care for laughter. The sky only cared for the one who dared to claim it. And as she pierced the clouds, Ilara Vance became more than a pilot. She became the weapon the world hadn't believed it had. The Phantom Talon ripped through the cloud deck with a sonic crack that shattered the morning sky, and for the first time in her life Ilara felt the machine move not as an extension of her will but as a reflection of it. Every twitch of her fingers, every shift of her thought, translated instantly into motion, the ship reacting faster than her body could even register. It wasn't like flying, it was like breathing, like existing in two forms at once. The earth fell away below her, the horizon curving into the infinite black where the stars waited. The comms crackled with voices from command, half disbelief, half frantic updates, but she filtered them out until only the rhythm of her own pulse and the raw data flooding her senses remained. Up ahead, streaks of light cut through the atmosphere, descending weapons platforms cloaked in stealth, moving faster than conventional interceptors could track. She saw their formations like birds of prey, every movement telegraphing intent, and something in her chest tightened because she knew they were not machines alone. The precision was too sharp, too alive. Someone was behind them, guiding them, and whoever it was had studied humanity long enough to know where to strike first. Her visor painted targets across her field of vision, red symbols pulsing like a heartbeat. She focused on one at the edge of formation, a drone the size of a gunship, its plating black as obsidian, absorbing radar. Without conscious thought, she shifted the Phantom Talon's trajectory, slipping under its blind spot as the cannons unfolded from her wings. She fired once, a clean shot, and the drone disintegrated into sparks that fell toward the ocean below. The comms erupted with shocked voices, commanders demanding confirmation, analysts stammering that no simulation had predicted such a clean intercept at those speeds. Ilara ignored them. She had no time to prove herself to doubters. The rest of the swarm adjusted immediately, banking hard as if angered, their formation tightening around her like wolves circling prey. The Phantom Talon shivered with the energy of her nerves, and she breathed deep, forcing calm into her veins, because panic would kill her faster than their weapons. The second wave struck. Missiles flared white, streaking toward her from angles impossible to cover all at once. Any other pilot would have tried to outfly them, but Ilara didn't move until the last possible second. She let the ship absorb her calculation, feeling trajectories not as numbers but as instincts, the way a hawk sees wind it cannot measure. At the edge of collision, she rolled the Phantom Talon into a dive, cutting through a gap that existed for no more than a fraction of a second. The missiles crossed paths, colliding with each other in a blossom of fire that lit the stratosphere. The shockwave punched her chest, but the ship held steady, gliding through chaos like a shadow untouched by flame. She didn't grin, didn't shout. Her face remained set in cold focus. For years they had mocked her instincts, and now those same instincts were the only weapon standing between humanity and annihilation. But the battle was not won. The swarm reorganized, their movements shifting from aggressive to calculating, and she felt their eyes on her though they had none. The Phantom Talon sensors picked up encrypted signals, something like a language, a cadence not random but deliberate. She realized with a chill that this was not just an automated strike. It was a test, a hunt designed to measure her responses, to catalog her every maneuver. They had known about the Phantom Talon. They had anticipated a champion. And now they wanted to dissect it, to dissect her. She tightened her grip on the controls, jaw clenched, refusing to be their specimen. She was not a lab rat in the sky. She was the predator, and they would learn that in blood and fire. She banked upward, engines screaming, pulling the swarm after her into thinner air. Her vision blurred at the edges as G-forces crushed her body against the seat, but the ship compensated, feeding stabilizers into her veins. The higher she climbed, the colder the stars grew, until the world below shrank to a marble drowned in haze. The swarm pursued relentlessly, dozens of them, their thrusters leaving trails of burning light behind. At this altitude, a single mistake would end her. Her oxygen clipped shallow, her breath fogging inside the helmet, but she didn't flinch. Instead she let go of fear and thought of the silence she had always found in the simulator chambers, the silence that felt like home. In that silence she moved. She cut her engines for half a heartbeat, letting gravity seize her like a stone, and the swarm overshot, their formation scattering to avoid colliding with each other. In that heartbeat she reignited the thrusters, spun the phantom talon into their flank and opened fire. Plasma lanced outward, each shot calculated not as math but as instinct, threading through the weak points she felt more than saw. 4 drones erupted in cascading explosions, 2 more spiraled helpless into atmosphere. The swarm howled back, launching counterfire, but she was already gone, a blur vanishing into the black. One by one she dismantled their pattern, forcing them into chaos, until what had once been a perfect wall of death was nothing more than shards of light burning across the void. Back on the ground, in the command center, men and women who had doubted her were silent, their eyes fixed on screens that showed Eagle 7 carving death into the enemy. They whispered words they hadn't dared before, words like unbelievable, impossible, and finally, ours. Yet Alara heard none of it. The only sound in her ears was the rising static, a distortion bleeding into the comms. Through the hiss came a voice, not human, cold as metal yet sharpened by intelligence. It spoke not in words but in cadence, translated by the Talon systems into something she could understand. You are not prey. You are anomaly. We will return for you. Her blood iced as the last of the swarm pulled back, retreating into orbit faster than she could chase. The battle was over, but it was not victory. It was recognition. They had seen her. They had marked her. And somewhere above, beyond the veil of atmosphere, eyes she could not imagine were watching, studying, waiting. She exhaled, steadying her breath as the stars flickered against her canopy. Humanity thought she was a joke once. The enemy no longer did. And that was both the greatest honor and the deadliest curse she could have earned. Alara guided the phantom Talon back through atmosphere, her body heavy with the weight of acceleration, the cockpit rattling as she cut through turbulence like a blade. The flames of re-entry streaked across the canopy, and for a moment it was as if she was burning alive, falling like a meteor. But the ship held, wrapping her in its unshakable grip until the heat bled away and the sky darkened to a steel-blue horizon. Below, the base stretched out like a fortress of concrete and steel at the edge of the sea, runways glowing under emergency lights, and she brought the Talon down with the precision of instinct. The landing struts touched asphalt, sparks died under pressure, and the hangar swallowed her whole as the massive doors sealed behind. Silence hit her like a hammer. She sat in the cockpit, breathing slow, eyes fixed on nothing, every nerve still alive with the echo of battle. She had fought them. She had survived. But survival didn't feel like victory, it felt like being chosen by an enemy that wanted her for reasons she could not yet understand. The canopy hissed open, and voices roared around her as ground crews swarmed the fighter. Some stared at her as if she had risen from myth, others spoke her call sign with reverence, the same name they once mocked. She unlatched herself slowly, boots hitting the platform, helmet tucked under her arm. She could feel the eyes burning into her, and yet not one of them dared speak until the commanding officer approached, his expression carved from stone. General Rourke was a man who had led operations that shaped entire conflicts, a man whose word could unmake careers. He looked at her for a long time, his jaw tight, his eyes reflecting the weight of something unsaid. Finally he spoke. You weren't supposed to come back, he said quietly, words not meant for humiliation but acknowledgement. But you did. And now nothing will be the same. Then before she could answer, he gestured sharply. Debrief. Now. They led her into the war room, its walls alive with holographic projections of orbital trajectories, red dots marking potential strikes. Data streams flooding faster than analysts could process. Every senior officer sat around the table, their uniforms pressed, their faces shadowed by exhaustion and disbelief. As Alara stood before them, the feed replayed her combat from the Talon's perspective. Every maneuver, every strike, every impossibility she had performed. They watched in silence, some leaning forward as though afraid to blink. When the last drone retreated into orbit, the projection froze and the room filled with whispers. The analysts spoke first, rapid voices layering over each other. The enemy wasn't a random strike fleet, it was reconnaissance. They had come to measure defenses and more terrifyingly they had left on purpose. They weren't defeated, one officer said grimly. They disengaged because they had what they wanted. Another added, and what they wanted was her. All eyes turned toward Alara. She felt the weight of their stares, the way a soldier feels crosshairs on her chest. Rourke leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the table. They called you an anomaly, he said, his voice carrying the same static edge she had heard in the comms. We intercepted fragments of that transmission. They know you. They recognized you. And that means this isn't about the Phantom Talon, it's about Eagle 7. His words struck like steel against bone. Ilara kept her face calm, but inside, the truth twisted sharp. The enemy had spoken to her. Not to the fleet, not to command. To her. A single human pilot. What was it in her that made her the anomaly they wanted? She didn't answer because there was no answer she trusted yet, only instinct whispering that the war she had been thrown into was no longer about nations or armies, it was about her survival and what she represented. The debrief unraveled into arguments, generals slamming fists, strategists shouting about deploying the Phantom Talon again, about using her as bait to draw the enemy back. Some wanted to ground her, claiming the risk of losing the only pilot who could fly the craft was too great. Others demanded she be studied, tested, dissected if necessary to uncover why her nervous system aligned with the Talon when no other ace could manage it. Through the storm of voices, Ilara remained silent, her gaze steady on the holographic swarm frozen in orbit. She felt no pride in their awe, no triumph in their recognition. She only felt the shadow of that cold alien voice, promising return. And she knew that whatever they were planning above, it was only the beginning. When the meeting adjourned in chaos, Rourke intercepted her again, his eyes colder than before. He walked her down the dim corridor, his boots heavy on concrete. At last, away from the others, he said quietly, "You realize they're going to try to own you now. Not just the enemy. The Air Command. Politicians. Scientists. They'll all want a piece of Eagle 7. And I can't stop that tide." He stopped, turning to her with something almost like regret in his voice. "You were the weapon we didn't know we had. That makes you dangerous not just to them but to us." She met his gaze, calm as stone, and replied softly, "Then I'll be what I need to be. Not theirs. Not yours. Just mine." Rourke studied her for a long moment before nodding once. "We'll see." That night, she sat alone in the hangar beside the Phantom Talon. The others had gone, the machinery silenced, only the hum of residual power in the fighter's frame breaking the stillness. She placed a hand on its cold plating, feeling the faint vibration beneath, as if the machine was alive, waiting, breathing with her. She whispered into the quiet, "Why me?" But the ship gave no answer, only that silent thrum that felt like destiny breathing down her neck. Above, through the skylights, she could see stars piercing the dark. Somewhere out there, the swarm was waiting, watching, promising return. And though every instinct told her she had stepped into a war far larger than herself, she felt no fear. Only inevitability. She was Eagle 7. And the sky had already chosen her. The enemy did not wait long. 3 nights after her return, when the base had only just begun to breathe under the illusion of calm, the skies cracked open again. Radar stations across the continent screamed alarms, satellites flared with interference, and the darkness above filled with shapes not meant to be seen by human eyes. This time it was not a probing fleet of drones, it was something heavier, something vast, vessels so large they blotted out constellations as they moved. Command centers across the world lit up with panic, scrambling defensive networks, calling every reserve into readiness. Yet even as entire air wings prepared for launch, the encrypted feed carried one unshakable fact. The swarm was not attacking cities, not targeting silos, not striking borders. They were descending in a straight line, a narrow vector that led to one destination alone, the base where the Phantom Talon rested, where Eagle 7 was housed. Ilara was pulled from half-sleep by the klaxon wail, her body jolting upright as the room vibrated with tension. She didn't hesitate. Boots on the floor, flight suit snapped on, helmet under arm, she was already moving when the officers reached her quarters. Their faces were pale with fear, but their words tried to mask it. "They're not coming for the planet," one of them stammered. "They're coming for you." She said nothing, just pushed past them, her stride unbroken, because she already knew. Deep down she had known since the moment that cold alien voice spoke through the comms. They weren't interested in humanity as a whole. They wanted the anomaly. They wanted her. The base became chaos. Pilots rushed to their fighters, sirens split the night air, and anti-air batteries locked onto the heavens. But General Rourke's order cut through the storm like a blade. "All fighters stand down. The Phantom Talon launches first." His words froze the others. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, that against a fleet larger than anything Earth had ever seen, one pilot was being sent alone. Yet Rourke's voice brooked no debate. "They've marked her. If anyone else engages first, they'll be slaughtered. She's the key." Some cursed, some spat, but none dared challenge him. And so the hangar doors yawned wide, and once again Ilara climbed the platform, the eyes of the entire base locked on her back. The phantom Talon came alive the moment she slid into the cockpit. Its systems pulsed with urgency, almost as if it too felt the enemy's approach, as if it too understood the stakes. The canopy sealed, lights flared, and the hum of synchronization rippled through her blood like a second heartbeat. Outside, the night split with streaks of fire as the first enemy vessels cut through atmosphere, massive hulls glowing with heat. Their silhouettes were monstrous, alien constructs shaped not for beauty but domination, their wings jagged like knives, their cores pulsing with energy that no human reactor could mimic. For an instant Alara felt the weight of what she faced press into her chest, a tide of inevitability. Then the engines roared and the phantom Talon hurled itself into the sky. The swarm closed around her almost immediately, a net of light and shadow moving faster than thought. They didn't fire, not at first. They simply circled, boxing her in, their weapons aimed but not released. It was a display, a silent command, surrender. But Alara felt her jaw tighten, and her hand moved to the throttle. Surrender was not written in her blood. She drove the Talon upward, cutting through their formation with a burst of speed so violent the air itself split. They followed instantly, their patience vanishing as missiles streaked from their hulls. She wove through them like a thread through a needle, banking, rolling, firing in controlled bursts. Explosions lit the night, thunder rolled across the sea, and the world below shook as though a storm of fire had been unleashed. For every drone she destroyed, 3 more appeared, their shadows blotting the stars. Still she fought, every maneuver a defiance carved in flame. Back in command, officers shouted that she couldn't hold them, that she needed reinforcements, but Rourke silenced them with a single raised hand. He wasn't watching the numbers. He was watching her. The feed showed Alara moving the phantom Talon beyond anything the simulators had predicted, her reflexes merging with the machine until it was no longer clear where the pilot ended and the craft began. Analysts whispered words like impossible, inhuman, but Rourke said nothing. He saw what they couldn't admit. She wasn't just flying the Talon. She was becoming it. The enemy seemed to realize it too. Their formation shifted, and out of the swarm emerged something larger, a vessel shaped like a spearhead, its hull gleaming with alien light. It didn't fire. It transmitted. The comms filled with static, then resolved into that same voice she had heard days before, only sharper now, louder, a vibration that rattled her teeth. Anomaly. You will not be destroyed. You will be taken. The words slid into her skull, not through ears but through thought itself, and for the first time, Alara felt a pressure deeper than combat, a weight pressing against her very will. The Talon shuddered as if resisting, its systems spiking in defiance, and she realized with a chill that the ship was fighting the intrusion with her. They weren't just after the pilot. They were after the bond. She roared into the comms, her voice shaking the cockpit, "You'll never have me," and slammed the Talon into a dive, breaking the mental grip as fire trails licked the hull. Missiles shrieked past, plasma bolts carved air, but she was gone, streaking through chaos like a phantom born of rage. She targeted the spearhead vessel, locking every weapon system she had onto its pulsing core and unleashed hell. The sky lit with an explosion so bright it turned night into day, shockwaves hammering the ocean in walls of flame. For a heartbeat, silence reigned as if she had struck the beast dead. Then the swarm screamed, not with sound but with energy, their entire formation convulsing in fury. They surged at her, endless, merciless, and Alara gritted her teeth, blood dripping from her nose, vision blurring. She had wounded them, yes, but she had also made them angry. In that storm of fire and steel, one truth crystallized in her chest. This war was no longer about Earth or even humanity. It was about her and them. A hunter and its chosen prey. A weapon and the anomaly it sought. And she knew with absolute certainty that they would not stop until one of them was erased from the sky forever. The ocean still burned long after the last fragments of alien hull had vanished beneath the waves, flames stretching across the horizon like a wound carved into the planet itself. The phantom Talon landed hard on the runway, its plating scorched black, its engines coughing sparks, yet still alive, still bound to her. Alara staggered out of the cockpit, her body trembling, her vision edged in darkness. Blood streaked from her nose, her lips, even her ears, but she refused to collapse. She walked the platform with steady boots, helmet clenched under her arm, as the crews stared in stunned silence. For the first time, none of them whispered mockery or doubt. They simply watched, eyes wide, as if the figure walking past them was no longer just a pilot but something born out of myth and fire. Medics rushed to intercept her, voices urgent, but she brushed them aside until General Rourke himself stepped forward. His face was grim, his jaw locked, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. Fear not of her failure, but of what she had just proven herself capable of. He said nothing in front of the others, simply gestured her toward the command building. She followed, silent, her lungs burning with every breath. The war room was darker than before, the screens filled not with battle feeds but with still images, scans of her neural patterns during the fight, overlays of the Phantom Talon synchronization levels. Lines that should have been jagged waves of chaos were smooth, perfect, as if the pilot and the machine had shared a single mind. Around the table sat officers and scientists, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they whispered terms that chilled her: inhuman coherence, genetic anomaly, resonance beyond tolerance thresholds. At last Rourke broke the silence. "They didn't just stumble onto you," he said flatly. "They were looking for you. And now I know why." He tapped the console, and new data filled the projection, a classified file stamped with seals Alara had never seen. She frowned, but before she could question, he spoke again, softer this time, almost reluctant. "You weren't supposed to know this. Not until after the war. Maybe not ever. But we don't have the luxury of secrets anymore." He turned the file toward her. "You aren't like the others, Vance. You were engineered." The words cut sharper than any blade. For a moment she thought she had misheard, but the file glowed with undeniable truth. Genetic mapping, experimental augmentations, records of trials dating back to before her birth. She read words that blurred in her vision: Project Resonant, pilot integration candidates, neural spinal modification, and her stomach twisted. Her whole life she had fought to prove herself against mockery, against doubters who claimed she was unfit, unworthy. But the truth was darker: she had never been like them at all. She had been built for this. Designed to merge with machines no human could control. She looked up at Rourke, her voice steady but colder than ice. "So I'm not a pilot. I'm a weapon you made." Rourke did not flinch. His gaze held hers, unyielding. "We didn't make you. We found you. You were born in one of the experimental facilities, abandoned when funding was cut. Most of the others didn't survive. You did. And you were placed into the academy like any other recruit, your file rewritten to keep the truth buried. You weren't meant to be told because we didn't know if you would ever reach this point. But the enemy knew. Somehow they knew what you are." His words hung heavy, undeniable, but her chest burned with fury all the same. She had lived her whole life believing she had earned her place, that her instincts were hers alone, that every fight, every hour of training had carved her into what she was. And now they told her it was written in her blood from the beginning. The officers around the table argued again, voices clashing. Some demanded she be pulled from the front lines, locked away before the enemy could capture her. Others argued she should be deployed immediately, used as the spearhead of every counterstrike. The scientists wanted to study her, dissect her secrets, force her to reveal why she alone resonated with the Talon. Through it all, Alara stood still, her face unreadable, but inside her chest a storm raged. She was tired of being spoken about as if she were not in the room, tired of being treated as a tool by the enemy and by her own command alike. She slammed her fist onto the table, the crack silencing the room. "You think I'm your weapon?" she said, her voice carrying enough steel to still every tongue. "Then remember this: I'm not yours to use. Not theirs, not yours. I'll fight for Earth because it's my home, not because you made me to." The silence that followed was heavy, but Rourke's eyes softened with something almost like respect. Later, alone in her quarters, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, searching her own face for answers. Did she look engineered? Did she look less human? The woman staring back was scarred, exhausted, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights, but she was still Alara Vance. And yet, the alien voice echoed in her mind: "You will be taken." She touched the glass as though trying to see beyond her own skin, trying to decide whether she was still herself or just the product of someone else's design. The thought that chilled her most was not that she was different. It was that the enemy might understand her better than her own people ever would. That night she returned to the hangar, unable to sleep. The Phantom Talon loomed in silence, its surface gleaming under the dim lights. She placed her palm against it, and once again felt that faint hum beneath the metal. Not machine. Not entirely. Something in it breathed with her, resonated with her blood. She whispered to it, not knowing if it could hear: "If I was made for you, then we'll decide what that means. Not them. Not anyone else." The Talon pulsed faintly in response, a low vibration that sent shivers through her bones as if it had understood. And far above, beyond the curve of the earth, alien ships hovered in silence, waiting, patient. watching the anomaly grow into what they desired most. The attack came without warning, not with fire and fury but with silence. Satellites that had tracked the alien fleet's retreat went blind all at once, their feeds replaced by static, their sensors dead. Ground radar followed, screens turning black one by one, as if the sky itself had been erased. Commanders shouted across channels, technicians scrambled to reboot systems, but nothing came back. The world above had gone dark. And in that darkness something moved. Shadows slipped past orbital defenses, unseen, unmeasured, until alarms screamed within the very base where Alara slept. The intruders had not come with fleets or bombings. They had come with precision, landing ships no larger than shuttles, gliding like knives into the heart of the installation. By the time Alara was on her feet, the base was already under siege. Sirens wailed, red lights bathed the corridors, and the crack of weapons echoed in the distance. She sprinted through the chaos, sidearm in hand, boots pounding against steel floors, smoke stinging her lungs. Soldiers fought in tight formations, their rifles lighting the hallways with desperate bursts, but the enemies they faced were unlike the drones of before. These were figures cloaked in dark armor, their movements unervingly fluid, their weapons pulsing with alien energy. They didn't fire wildly. They advanced with purpose, cutting down anyone who resisted, driving deeper into the base in a straight, unbroken line. And Alara understood instantly, they weren't here for destruction. They were here for her. General Rourke's voice cut through the chaos on the comms, ordering her to move to the hangar immediately. They'll breach your quarters. They'll breach command. Your only chance is the Talon. Go. She obeyed without hesitation, weaving through fire and rubble, every step shadowed by the knowledge that her presence was drawing death closer to everyone around her. Twice she was forced to fight, exchanging fire with armored invaders whose helmets reflected no light, whose eyes burned with an eerie white glow. They moved like predators, faster than any human soldier, their blades cutting through steel as if it were flesh. Each one she killed only deepened her certainty. These weren't soldiers of conquest. They were hunters. She reached the hangar as its doors shuddered under the impact of enemy charges. Crews had already evacuated, alarms flashing across the bay. The Phantom Talon stood waiting, its surface gleaming faintly in the crimson light, like a beast caged and restless. She sprinted toward it, only to feel the sudden crash of the hangar doors bursting open. The armored figures stormed inside, weapons raised, their lines tightening to trap her. Dozens of them, maybe more, their steps in perfect synchronization, their voices silent. She dove behind a supply crate as their fire scorched the ground, the air filling with smoke and heat. Her sidearm was nothing against their armor, but she fought anyway, firing, moving, refusing to yield. She knew she couldn't win. Not here, not like this. The Talon was her only salvation. With a desperate dash she broke cover, sprinting across open ground under a storm of plasma bolts. Pain seared her shoulder as one shot grazed her, spinning her but not stopping her. She hurled herself into the cockpit, slamming the canopy shut as the first of the armored figures leapt onto the Talon's hull. They pounded against it, claws sparking, weapons carving grooves into its plating. For a terrifying moment she thought they might breach it before she could launch. Then the Talon roared, engines igniting with a fury that hurled bodies backward in waves of fire. She yanked the controls and the craft surged forward, tearing free of the hangar in a blast of shattered steel and smoke, leaving the base behind in chaos. But she wasn't free. The intruder ships detached from the shadows above, sleek predators with engines glowing like knives. They pursued instantly, their weapons tearing the sky, their movements unervingly precise. It was a hunt and she was the prey. Alara pushed the Talon harder than ever before, every nerve in her body wired into the machine, her thoughts fusing with its circuits. She banked through clouds, dove between mountain ridges, climbed so steeply her chest nearly collapsed under the force, but still they followed, relentless. And worse, she could feel something clawing at the edge of her mind, a pull, invisible but undeniable. The same alien pressure she had felt in battle before, now stronger, sharper, like hooks dragging at her consciousness. Her breath came ragged, her hands shaking on the controls. She felt herself slipping, her will weakening under the weight of the intrusion. The Talon responded in kind, its systems flaring in resistance, alarms screaming as its power surged dangerously high. Together they fought not only the hunters outside but the unseen grip pressing inside her skull. She bit down on her lip until blood filled her mouth, forcing herself to stay anchored. "Not yours," she whispered, the words trembling but defiant. "Never yours." The Talon's hum grew stronger, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she realized with startling clarity that it was shielding her, pushing back against the mental assault as fiercely as it pushed against enemy fire. The battle tore across the night sky, lighting it with trails of fire and streaks of energy. Elara destroyed 2 of the hunters with precise bursts, her missiles finding the cracks in their sleek hulls, their explosions scattering debris across the clouds. But for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place, their formation tightening, her escape routes narrowing. She felt the inevitability pressing in again, the certainty that they would not stop until she was theirs. And then, in the midst of the chaos, the alien voice returned, deeper than before, vibrating through her bones. "Surrender. You are resonance. You are ours." The words made her vision blur, her grip falter, but she screamed into the comms, a raw cry of fury. "I belong to no one." With that, she forced the Talon into a maneuver that defied reason, plunging straight into a storm forming over the ocean, lightning splitting the sky, winds tearing like claws. The hunters hesitated for the first time, unwilling to follow into the chaos. Elara rode the storm like a blade, weaving through lightning strikes that illuminated her craft in ghostly white. The Talon shuddered, groaned, but held. When she emerged, only half of the hunters still pursued, the rest scattered by the storm's fury. She seized the moment, locking her weapons on the largest ship, and unleashed everything she had left. The explosion ripped the night apart, fire cascading across the heavens. The survivors broke off, vanishing into the clouds, retreating with the same silence they had arrived. Elara's hands trembled as the sky fell quiet again, her breath ragged, her body battered. She was alive, but she knew the truth now with terrifying certainty. The enemy no longer wanted to destroy humanity. They wanted to capture her, and they would tear the world apart piece by piece until they did. The storm had not yet faded when Elara brought the Phantom Talon back toward the coast, its hull scorched, its systems screaming for maintenance but still flying. She barely guided it onto the runway before collapsing forward, her forehead pressing against the console as her strength drained away. Emergency crews swarmed the craft, but none dared open the canopy until it hissed on its own, revealing her bloodied and trembling yet still conscious. They reached for her, but she pushed their hands aside and staggered out, her boots dragging across the tarmac. She could see it in their eyes now, fear, awe, confusion. Not a single soul spoke. When she finally reached the shadow of the command tower, General Rourke was waiting, his face grim. He gave no congratulations, no praise, only a quiet order: inside. Now. The war room buzzed with chaos when she entered. Maps and projections filled the walls, but every image pointed not to the enemy fleet, not to planetary defenses but to her. Files marked "Resonant Subject" scrolled across the screens. Technicians tracked not only her flight path but her heart rate, her neural responses, even the brief surges of alien intrusion she had fought off. It was as if she herself had become the battlefield. The officers around the table were divided more fiercely than before. Some shouted that she must be locked down, placed under guard before the enemy launched another extraction attempt. Others demanded she be sent immediately on the offensive, wielded as the spearhead in a counterattack that might finally shift the war. Rourke silenced them with a growl, but his own gaze betrayed uncertainty. Elara stood in the middle of the storm, refusing to be spoken about as if she were not there. "They won't stop," she said, her voice ragged yet unshaken. "They don't care how many soldiers die or how many bases burn. They only want me. And you all know it now." Her words stilled the room, though she could see the weight settling on them like chains. "If I hide, they'll tear this planet apart piece by piece until they drag me out. If I fight, I become the reason they keep coming back. Either way, humanity pays the price." She took a breath, forcing herself not to falter. "So tell me, do you see me as your savior or as your curse?" The silence stretched until one of the senior scientists, her voice trembling, spoke what none had dared. "You are both." That word, echoing in the chamber, cut deeper than any blade. Elara felt the truth of it in her bones. She was a weapon humanity could not afford to lose, but also a beacon drawing annihilation closer with every passing hour. And in that balance, there was no room for her humanity. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms, but she would not let them decide her fate. "Then I'll choose for myself," she said coldly. "I'll fight, but not as your pawn. If you want me in that cockpit, you'll trust me to decide how this war is fought. Otherwise, you can shoot me now and save the enemy the trouble." Shock rippled across the table. No one dared reply. At last Rourke spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "She's right. Whether we like it or not, the enemy has made her the center of this war. And if we strip her of choice, we're no better than they are. His words silenced the protests before they could begin. For the first time, the command did not speak of Ilara as a subject or a resource. They began to speak of her as what she had always demanded to be: a pilot, a fighter, a human being. Plans shifted. Strategies bent around her, not as chains but as shields, designed not only to unleash her but to protect her from capture. For the first time, she was no longer being used. She was being followed. But the cost of that shift weighed on her heavily. In the days that followed, Earth Command's defenses bent inward, focusing resources not on every border but on protecting her location. She saw the consequence in the news feeds that slipped through: colonies abandoned, fleets stretched thin, soldiers fighting without air cover because the Talon and its pilot were kept near Central Command. Every victory she earned meant another place left vulnerable. Every time she strapped into the Talon, she felt the eyes of not only her superiors but of civilians across the planet, watching, waiting, desperate for her to turn the tide. She had become a symbol they clung to, a legend rising faster than she could control. And that terrified her more than the enemy's pursuit. Alone at night, she would walk the hangar where the Talon rested in silence. Sometimes she would place her hand against its hull and feel its hum echoing back, steady, alive. It was the only presence that did not judge her, did not demand more than she could give. Yet even it seemed to carry expectation, as if waiting for her to step beyond fear into something greater. She wondered if she could, if she even wanted to. Her whole life had been spent proving she was enough. Now she was asked to be more than human, more than legend, something forged between. And she did not know if she could bear it. The enemy, however, wasted no time in deepening that weight. New broadcasts hijacked Earth's networks, images of alien emissaries cloaked in shadow, their voices resonating with the same cadence she had felt in her mind. They did not threaten destruction. They promised mercy, if she surrendered. "The resonant belongs to us," the voice declared. "Give her freely and your world will be spared." Panic rippled through populations already broken by war. Some demanded she be handed over, their fear outweighing loyalty. Others rallied in her defense, declaring her Earth's only hope. Streets filled with protests, both for and against her, humanity itself divided by the question of whether one woman was worth the survival of billions. Ilara watched the broadcasts in silence, her stomach twisting as the weight of their faces pressed into her mind. Children holding signs that begged for her protection. Mothers demanding she be given away. Soldiers vowing to die at her side. She turned off the screen, but their voices lingered. She had never asked to be a symbol. She had only wanted to fly. But now, standing in the center of the storm, she understood what the enemy had done. They hadn't just made her their target. They had made her humanity's test. And one way or another, she would not be allowed to step aside. The choice came sooner than anyone expected. While protests shook the cities and debates fractured the command council, the enemy returned, not with stealth or small strike teams but with a fleet that blotted out the stars. Their ships unfolded across the heavens like vast wings, their formation deliberate, their silence more terrifying than any bombardment. They did not fire immediately. Instead, every comm channel, every broadcast frequency on Earth carried the same voice, low and resonant, as if it spoke from within each listener's chest. "Resonant," it said, addressing Ilara directly. "Your world fractures because of you. End their suffering. Come to us and we will withdraw. Refuse and every city will burn until nothing remains." The ultimatum could not be mistaken. She was no longer simply their target. She was their leverage to break humanity without a fight. Commanders argued furiously. Some demanded immediate surrender, claiming the survival of billions outweighed the fate of one pilot. Others swore that yielding would mean humanity's permanent enslavement, that once Ilara was taken, the enemy would never stop. The council fractured in open shouting matches, officers slamming fists on tables, politicians transmitting orders that contradicted each other by the hour. But in the midst of their chaos, Ilara stood silent, watching the fleet blot out the sky from the tower's window. She had never felt smaller, never more aware that the weight of a planet rested on her shoulders. Yet beneath the crushing fear, she felt something else stirring, an unshakable calm like the stillness before a storm. For the first time, she no longer asked if she could carry the burden. She knew she must. She walked out of the war room without a word, her boots striking with steady rhythm down the corridor, every guard she passed stiffening at her gaze. The hangar opened before her, the phantom Talon gleaming in silence, its lines lit by the red glare of alarms. She laid her hand on its hull, and it answered with a low hum, the same resonance that had once frightened her but now felt like an embrace. It's not just me anymore, she whispered. It's us. And we're not theirs. Sliding into the cockpit, she felt the canopy seal above her, the air growing still, the talon systems coming alive like a heartbeat sinking to her own. The ground crews shouted protests, but she ignored them. The engines roared, and with a surge of fire, she launched into the sky, cutting through the clouds toward the waiting fleet. The enemy hailed her immediately, their voice pressing at the edges of her mind. You cannot win, Resonant. You are bound to us. Surrender and you will know peace. Ilara laughed, a raw, defiant sound that echoed inside the cockpit. Peace isn't given, she growled. It's fought for. She drove the talon into the heart of the enemy formation, weaving between colossal ships whose weapons glowed with restrained power. She did not fire. Not yet. Instead, she pushed herself deeper into the talon systems, letting its alien-forged circuits and her own will blur into one. The pressure in her skull sharpened as the enemy pressed harder, their voices layering, a chorus that demanded obedience. For a heartbeat, she felt herself slipping, the pull almost irresistible. And then, like a blade through fog, the talon's resonance surged, not as a shield but as a voice of its own, joining hers in defiance. We are not yours. The clash was no longer just of ships and weapons. It was of wills. The enemy pressed their domination like chains of thought, while Ilara pushed back with everything she had ever been, every flight, every rejection, every triumph, every scar. The talon magnified it, carrying her defiance into a wave that rippled across the battlefield. Screens on Earth flickered, broadcasts hijacked not by the enemy but by her. Citizens saw not the fleet's ultimatum but the face of their pilot, eyes blazing, voice unshaken. They think I belong to them, she declared, her words carried to billions. But I belong to no one. And neither do you. We fight not because victory is promised but because surrender is worse than death. Stand with me. Stand as one. The world erupted, fear transmuted into fury, voices that had begged for her surrender now shouting her name in defiance. Enraged, the enemy opened fire. The sky ignited with streams of plasma and beams of light, but Ilara and the talon moved as one, slipping between shots that should have been impossible to evade, returning fire with precision that tore through the first of the great ships. Explosions lit the void, and the battle began in earnest. Human fleets, scattered and battered, rallied to her signal, ships rising from bases across the globe, commanders finding courage where there had only been doubt. The sky above Earth became a storm of fire and steel, humanity fighting not for survival alone but for freedom claimed in the voice of one pilot. Ilara led the charge, her talon carving through enemy formations, its resonance growing stronger with each strike, until it seemed the ship itself sang with her fury. The battle raged for hours, a maelstrom of destruction that painted the heavens. The enemy pressed endlessly, their numbers overwhelming, but for the first time they faltered. For the first time they met resistance not fractured but united. Ilara drove herself to the edge, blood streaking down her temple, every nerve ablaze, but she would not stop. The enemy's voices screamed inside her skull, 1,000 commands of surrender, but her answer never changed. Not yours. Not ever. With a final surge, she and the talon plunged into the heart of the enemy flagship, weapons blazing, resonance burning like a star. The detonation lit the sky brighter than dawn, and when the light faded, the fleet was breaking, their formation shattering, their grip on her mind torn away. Silence followed. The surviving enemy ships retreated into the dark, vanishing as suddenly as they had come. The battlefield drifted with debris, wreckage glowing faintly against the curve of Earth. Inside the shattered cockpit of the talon, Ilara sat trembling, breath ragged, eyes fixed on the stars. She had not destroyed them all. She knew they would return. But for now humanity had won, not because of her alone but because she had forced them to stand together. Her calm crackled, voices of soldiers, commanders, civilians flooding in, all calling her name. She closed her eyes, exhaustion crushing her, and whispered the truth she had only now come to accept. I was never just Eagle 7. I was always more. And so are we. The end.